This video lesson talks about how to use the slope equation and how to use point-slope form. So let's go ahead and talk about what slope is. Slope is referred to as the rise over run. And those are very elementary terms, rise over run. What that means at a high school level is change in y over change in x. And that little triangle is referred to as delta. Delta means change. In math world, the way that we write change is using subtraction. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. We're finding the difference between my x values and my y values. So let's go ahead and practice finding the slope of 2 points. So what we're doing here is we've got the point A and point B, and we want to find the rise over run, or the change in y over change in x. The first thing you have to do with any kind of formula involving x's and y's is label. x1, y1, x2, y2. Then I'm going to go ahead and write my formula down, because the best way to help you remember the formula is to just write it at the beginning of every problem. The more you write it, the easier it's going to be for you to memorize the formula and just understand what you're doing. So all you're going to do from here is substitute. The y sub 2 is 6, so we're going to replace y sub 2 with 6. The minus sign is always there. Y sub 1 is negative 3, and just because there's already a negative sign or a minus sign, I still need to put the negative 3. The 3 is negative, so that minus sign is always there. This 3 happened to be negative. I still have to put it. Then my x sub 2 value is 0 minus my x sub 1 value, which is 5. You can do this by hand, changing the negatives to pluses, the double negative. 6 plus 3 is 9. 0 minus 5 is negative 5. So 9 over negative 5 is the slope of my line. Now, if you don't want to do it that way and do it by hand, your calculator will definitely do it for you. However, it is crucial that you put parentheses in the right spot. So what I'm going to go ahead and do first is I'm going to do it wrong. And I'm purposely doing it this way because this is how a lot of you do it. And I want to make sure that you see the difference in what we're doing. So to start, a lot of you would just go 6 minus negative 3 divided by 0 minus 5. Error, divide by 0. And then you would freak out and you would go, I don't know why I'm dividing by 0. I don't understand. I'm dividing by 0 minus 5. What your calculator isn't smart enough to understand is it doesn't know that you want this to stay together and this to stay together. What your calculator is actually trying to do for you, it's trying to help you. It's trying to say, okay, by order of operations, I need to be using division first. So what your calculator is trying to do is it's trying to divide negative 3 by 0. We can't do that. So when we type enter, it's like, hey, this is an error. You want me to divide by 0. I can't do that. Your calculator doesn't understand that you technically want this top portion to stay together with the bottom piece. And you just want to go ahead and add or subtract first, then divide them. If that's what you want, you have to tell your calculator, hey, I want you to subtract first by putting parentheses around your values. So when we change and put parentheses, your calculator is now smart enough to realize, okay, you want me to simplify this top, simplify the bottom, then subtract. Now, slope is always a fraction. So we don't want to put slope as negative 1.8. We want to go math. Option 1 is fraction, so math and enter. And this means change my answer to a fraction. So negative 9 over 5, which is exactly what we got. It's okay that our negative was in the bottom. It's just good math practice to keep the numerator the negative 1 if there is a negative sign, but it's not wrong if the bottom is the negative. So the key part here is if you're doing slope formula, you need to make sure to put the top in parentheses and the bottom in parentheses so your calculator does what you want. Let's go ahead and move on to point-slope form. Point-slope form is an equation of a line, just like y equals mx plus b is slope-intercept form. The names of the lines are helpful to you because it tells you what you need. In point slope form, I need a point, which is going to be x1, y1, and I need a slope, which we're going to use as m. The formula is y minus y1 equals m parenthesis x minus x1. Notice it's called point slope form. I need a point, I need a slope. So let's go ahead and plug into our equation here. I'm going to label x1, y1, and we already have slope. This y value is going to stay y. But when I plug in my -7 for y1, the negative is going to change to a positive. The m is still 5/2 x minus, and my x1 value is 3. So all you're doing is you're taking the slope, you are plugging it in for m. Then you're taking your x1 value, which is 3, and you're subbing it in where you see x1. You're doing the same thing for y1. Now, let's stop and analyze point slope form. Notice in point slope form that it's the opposite point of what you think it is. So we plugged in a -7, but it changed to +7. We plugged in a +3, but it looks like a -3. That's the hardest part of point slope form. Point slope form actually makes your points look the opposite of what they really are because of the minus sign. So just be careful when you're plugging in or pulling out points. So let's try this next one. On this next problem, what we're going to go ahead and do is identify the point and identify our slope. It might help you to fill out the problem underneath. So y minus y1 equals m parenthesis x minus x1. So your point here is always going to be x1 comma y1. The only trick here is you have to do the opposite. So the x1 value looks positive, but remember, if it looks positive, it's really a negative. So this +3 is really a -3. The y1 value looks like a -6, but remember up here, the -3, we really plugged in a +3. So that means our y1 value is technically a +6. So just be very careful. Point slope form is not a difficult formula, but what is difficult about it is the fact that you're going to want to just look at it and say, oh, okay, our y1 value is negative because it looks negative. But it's different from slope-intercept form. The minus sign changes it. And in this part, the slope is just 2. Good old slope never changes unless you're talking in terms of parallel and perpendicular. But in this problem, when we're just identifying, all you have to do is find the slope. And the slope is the number in front of the parentheses. All right, moving on. We want to write the equation in point slope form through the points 1, -3, and -2, 5. Here's the problem that some of you guys have with math. When you're given options, you freak out because you don't know what option to pick. The trick to understanding point slope form and writing equations is that you have options, meaning you can kind of start where you want. If I want point slope form, I need a point and I need a slope. And most of you would look at this problem and say, well, I have 2 points, I have no slope. This is where the slope formula comes into play. So the first thing you want to make sure you do is find the slope. If I want to write it in point slope form, I have to have a slope. So I'm going to go ahead and write my formula because remember, writing the formula is like muscle memory. It just helps you practice. Now I'm going to label x1, y1, x2, y2. Substituting in 5 minus -3 over -2 minus 1. I'm going to go ahead and do this straight into my calculator, but I'm going to be careful because my calculator is not smart enough to know, hey, I want the top to stay together. So make sure that when you're doing this, that you're putting it in parentheses. So we should get parentheses 5 minus -3 divided by parentheses -2 minus 1. I get a big long decimal, but we don't want a decimal. Math, enter, enter. -8 over 3. So my slope is -8/3. Once you find the slope, step 2 is to pick a point and sub. So pick a point. Here's the part you don't like. There's 2 points, and you want to say, well, I don't know which point to pick. Here's the good thing. You can pick either one. It doesn't matter. There's 2 answers to this problem, just depending on what the point you pick. So I'm just going to go ahead, and since I know my point slope form uses x1 and y1, I'm going to go ahead and just use the point that's already labeled x1 and y1. So I actually don't even need to think about relabeling it. It's already labeled for me. So in this problem, I have exactly what I need. I needed a slope. I found the slope. I needed a point. I have chosen a point. And now all there's left to do is substitute. Y minus y1 equals in parentheses x minus x1. So y minus, and it's a -3, so it's going to change to positive. Our slope is -8/3. X minus, my x1 is 1. And that is now in point slope form. So remember, you have the option to pick either of these points. It's the same answer, so it's up to you to just decide. And finally, we're going to go ahead and graph these. So graphing point slope is a little harder than just graphing y equals mx plus b. In order to graph this, there isn't a y-intercept. You need to identify the point and the slope, which is exactly what we did at the top. Our point, remember, y minus y1 equals in parentheses x minus x1. If you write it underneath, pulling your points out is easier. Our point location is x1 comma y1. x1 is -1, but that really means it's +1. y1 looks like a +2. That really means it's -2. And then my slope is just my slope, 3. Technically, 3 is over 1, so when we're graphing, we want to make sure that we put the 3 over the 1. So the first thing that you have to do is plot your point. It's different from slope-intercept form because we're not graphing on the y-axis, we're graphing the point first. 1 comma -2. 1, -2. You have to plot that point first. The line has to go through it. Plot your point, and then from your point, you plot your slope. 3 over 1 really just means up 3, right 1. So in your mind, you just want to think about slope and what it does. So from here, I'm going to go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and then right 1. So 1, 2, 3, right 1. Plot your point. It takes a minimum of 2 points to make a line. So once you plot your 2 points, you can go ahead and line them up. Use a ruler or freehand and draw the line. So just remember, point first, from the point, graph the slope.